Hi, welcome to the Tuesday, September 22nd video for those of you who were absent or missed something in class today in P's. So we started off with our warm-up and we talked about just as briefly about life on different planets and talked about evidence on the planet Venus, or evidence for life on the planet Venus. Then we went into some announcements. So Thursday, that's this Thursday, there will be support hours for layers of the Earth activity for those of you who did not send that in. There will also be support hours for this density worksheet practice that many people did not submit. And at the end, I'll show you how to get to all this stuff. And finally, I'm going to be checking your density. I checked the density practice today, so if you didn't turn that in, you'll have to turn that in. So if your layers of the Earth is missing or density practice is missing, you'll get a message from me on Wednesday letting you know that you need to come into support hours. So make sure you check your Schoology messages. That's super important. It's your responsibility to check those daily. Today our objectives was to review Unit 1.1 and discuss CER, which stands for Claim Evidence Reasoning, and then answer Essential Question 2 with a claim, and then using evidence from 1.1. So to review Unit 1.1, in today's Schoology folder, I have the answer key for the note sheet that you did a couple of weeks ago. So what folks did was took a few minutes to sort of read over the note sheet. So let me show you where the note sheet answer key is. We're in Unit 1, W3 for Week 3. Today's Tuesday. And the note sheet is the second activity there, or second assignment there. It may be the first by the time you open this because the first activity will be unpublished shortly. Okay, so what you're going to do is just sort of read through and skim through the answer key. Now, once you finish reading and skimming through the answer key, you can use this answer key to do one of two things. If you submitted your note sheet and you got a score less than 100, by correcting it, you can get an additional 10 points. If you're missing it, then you can complete and resubmit this for a maximum of 50 points. So where do you get this note sheet again? To do that, you would go to Unit 1, Week 1, Tuesday. And here it is, the Geological Timescale Note Sheet. So you would open that up, and if you haven't submitted the document, you would fill in the blanks. If you have submitted the document already and you're just wanting to correct, what you would do is you would look in your Google Drive for this document. Look in your Google Drive for the note sheet, and then you can add and modify. All right, after we reviewed the note sheet, we talked about the history of the Earth. And the main thing is, throughout the history of the Earth has changed. The crust, the continents, atmosphere, climate, oceans, life forms, and even the length of a day has changed, which another student brought up. So all of those things have changed. So looking at the atmosphere, we talked about how the atmosphere changed. The atmosphere started off as very toxic. It was filled with CO2 or carbon dioxide. And over billions of years, bacteria produced oxygen through photosynthesis, and that made the atmosphere less toxic. And all of that happened in the Precambrian era. For climate, there was a lot of climate fluctuation and changes. So it fluctuated between hot and cold on the Earth. So when it was first formed, the Earth was extremely hot. And then during that same era, during the Precambrian era, there were times where the Earth was covered with ice, and that was known as snowball Earth. During the Cenozoic, which is where we are currently, we've had ice ages before, so we've had times when it was warmer and then cooler. So as you can see, the temperature has changed throughout. Now, what causes the temperature to change, one thing has to do with the CO2 or carbon dioxide, which traps the sun's infrared light and makes it warmer. So that's one way. Also, the snow caps that are covering the Earth, so right now in the North and South poles, the snow reflects light from the sun. So if you have a lot of snow, it's going to reflect more light and the Earth will remain cooler. We also looked at how the temperature of Earth has changed from the late 1800s to now. And one thing you'll notice is just like in the history of the Earth, temperature is constantly changing. But right now we're on a warming trend. And the reason why people believe that this is due to human activity, or known as climate change or global warming, as they say, is because this is happening a lot faster than it has in the past. So going back to how the climate has changed before, it has taken many, many years, millions of years for the climate to change, for the temperature to increase or decrease. And now it's happening a lot more rapidly. And they believe that's because of humans. We also looked at how the crust has changed. So when the Earth first started, there were these volcanic islands, and those volcanic islands formed crust. At one point, the crust got together and formed supercontinents. And sometimes the supercontinents broke apart. Now, there have been many supercontinents, but the two that you need to know are Rodinia, which is one of the earliest supercontinents during the Precambrian era, and Pangaea, which is the last supercontinent to form. And they call these supercontinents because, as you can see, all of the land is sort of clumped up into one place. Now, the reason why Pangaea is important is because it's split into the 7 continents. And there's a correction that we're going to make here. That was during the Mesozoic. All right, oceans. The Earth started with no oceans, and meteors brought the oceans. So water that we have today came from outer space billions of years ago, and has formed the oceans that we have today. We looked at how life forms change. We started off in the Precambrian era, our first era, there was bacteria. And then we had invertebrates, things without spines. In the Mesozoic, there was dinosaurs that dominated. And then the Cenozoic, mammals have dominated. So as you can see, life forms have changed throughout the history of the Earth. So one of your assignments is the stuff that we just reviewed from the note sheet and what we just discussed right now is to write down something you've learned or a question that you have in your KWLQ. All right, so where do you get the KWLQ? You can either go to the folder to get the KWLQ. So that folder is Unit 1. So let me go back one more so you can see that. Unit 1, Week 1, Tuesday. And you can open up the, oh, I'm sorry, this is the wrong folder. Give me a second. I'm sorry, here is the correct folder. So to get to the KWLQ, it's in Week 1, under Asynchronous, and this is the KWLQ document. Now, in this document, you should have already written down what you know and want to know about the topics that you were learning. Now you've learned some things. You're going to write down what you've learned and any questions you have here. Now, for the questions, it can be a clarifying question or something you're confused about, or it can be something that you're wondering, wanting to know more about. Now, the other way that you can access this document and all of the work for this week is, of course, in your work list. So if you go to your work list and you open that up, on Tuesday, you'll see it says fill out the L and Q of the KWLQ. If you click on that, it'll take you to the document. Or, and also for the essential question, which we'll look at later, it's also linked here. Again, you just click that on that and it'll take you there to the document you need. These are the 2 things you're actually doing for tonight for homework. All right, so let's move into that essential question part in that essential question document. So after we reviewed, and again, you're using the information from the review to fill out your KWLQ, what you learned and questions you have. We then went into our CER. So the reason why we're studying the history of the Earth in the first place is so we can answer that essential question, what the Earth will look like in 20 million years. And we're going to use what we've learned from the history of the Earth as our evidence for our CER. So again, this is our essential question. What will the Earth look like in 20 million years? And we're going to use a CER format. Now, CER stands for Claim, Evidence, Reasoning. And we're going to talk about what each of those parts are. So you may know this stuff and maybe this is new to you. But either way, it's helpful to go over it. A claim is a statement of what was learned in a lab or activity, or the answer to a question. We are going to be answering an essential question. That's what we're going to be focusing on. So we're focusing on this here. So our essential question is, what will the Earth look like in 20 million years? You're going to answer that question in a statement. The second part is the evidence. And that evidence, if you're doing a lab or if you have lab data, you can gather that from lab data, like a data table or a graph, or you can get that from the informational text. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be using what we've learned about the history of the Earth as our evidence. And then finally, the reasoning includes the rules or scientific principle or concept that explains why the evidence supports the claim. Now, this last part, the reasoning, we haven't learned what we need to learn to provide the reasoning. So we're only going to focus on the claim and the evidence for right now for our essential question. All right, to help us further understand claim evidence reasoning, in your Schoology folder, there is a playposit, and I'll show that to you. So in Schoology, Unit 1, Week 3, today's Tuesday, you're going to open that up and you'll see the CER playposit. I really recommend that you do this because this will help to strengthen your writing. So you're going to click preview, or for you, maybe it looks different, you just press play, and you're going to watch the claim evidence reasoning video. And the video, I forget how long it is, but it's not too long. But remember, there's parts there where it pauses and you'll have to answer questions. After you've done watch the CER playposit, let's talk about what's next. Next, what we did was we looked at several paragraphs, and we used our understanding that we gained from the playposit to identify claim evidence reasoning. I've listed those paragraphs here. And so this is the first paragraph. The question in this example was, do you have enough gas to get to your grandmother's house? And this was their CER. So you had to read this and identify the claim, evidence, and reasoning. So in this CER, this was the claim statement, this was the evidence, this was the reasoning. What I'm going to have you do is take a moment to pause and read this. The second example had to do with whether or not someone thought their father was an alien. And again, students read through this claim, evidence, reasoning and identified the claim part, the evidence part, and the reasoning part. And this is what that looks like. So if you want, you can pause to sort of read through and see what the claim, evidence, reasoning is here. The last example is a science example. We actually skipped this in this class, so if you want, you can read it over. It's there for you. Okay, so after we talked about claim, evidence, reasoning and sort of identify the claim, evidence, reasoning parts, what we went on to now was addressing our essential question. You have to write your answer to the essential question in a CER format. But as I said before, we're only going to focus on the claim and evidence part for today. So for the claim part, where it says state whether the Earth will look different or the same in 20 million years, right? Because the question is, what will the Earth look like in 20 million years? So your claim could be, in 20 million years, the Earth will look blank. Will it look the same, somewhat different, very different? You fill in here what you like. This is an optional sentence frame, by the way. You do not need to use a sentence frame, but it gives you a sense of what that will look like. For the evidence part, you can use this sentence starter. So for the evidence, you're going back to what you learned about the history of the Earth. So all that stuff we went over earlier. And you can consider each of these things and talk about how you think they would change. For example, if you were looking at the atmosphere, you could say the Earth's atmosphere will have more oxygen in it. So that would be your evidence. In 20 million years, the Earth's atmosphere will have more oxygen in it. And remember, you're writing this claim and evidence in your essential question document, which is this document here. Now remember, you may have something for take 1, you may have something for take 2. Just go to the next empty box. So if you have something for take 2, you go to take 3. If your take 2 is empty, write it in take 2. And finally, remember, you can access all of that stuff, all of those documents, using the work list. It's all linked there for you, so you should be able to access it that way. And if you can't, just send me a message. All right, last reminders. Last thing we did was just went over some reminders. So reminders, you're going to work on the essential question. You're also going to fill out the L and Q column of your KWLQ. Make sure you check your Schoology messages by Wednesday, 5 p.m. to see if you're required to come to support hours. And if you want to resubmit the note sheet, so this note sheet that we discussed earlier, if you want to resubmit this, you can. Okay, so how do you access your note sheet? Remember that note sheet was in Unit 1. I'll go back to show you how to get to that. Unit 1, Week 1, Tuesday. And it's Geological time scale note sheet. So if you did not submit it and you want to fill in the correct answers using the answer key from today's folder, you can get 50%. If you did submit it and you want to correct it, remember you can just find the document in your Schoology Drive and then resubmit. All right, that is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Message me if you have any questions and check your Schoology messages. Have a quality day, folks.